Welcome everybody to a special Monday Overreaction podcast of the Orange Bloods YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson. If you like this video, we're going to ask you to do that thing where you click on that little thumbs up thing. Give us a like, subscribe, do all of those things. Anwar, I feel like of all of the Overreaction Mondays that we've done for, I don't know, over a year now, we've been doing it for a while. I feel like the most set in stone topic of conversation in the history of Overreaction Mondays is today's show.
Yes.
Arch Manning. It's all Arch Manning all the time. When you look at the reaction that I think took place very organically, it wasn't like everybody said, hey, at this time, lose your mind over Arch Manning when he's in town. It just kind of happened. I'm curious, as we start the official Arch Manning Monday podcast and we overreact to everything that happened, give me your biggest Monday Arch Manning overreaction.
I have so many, and some of it's going to be based off of your column that you wrote there on Orange Bloods. But you know, the biggest deal to me, Catch, is that he came to town, right? And that there was a buzz that was going on that we have not seen with a recruit probably since I've been here, okay? And that's 7 years. And I'm not saying there hasn't been recruits that everyone's talked about, but I'm talking about I was receiving text messages over the weekend from what I would consider to be casual Texas fans, people who love University of Texas, but don't follow recruiting as heavily as you do or I do, or a lot of people who are watching this video may. And casual people, Catch, were texting me all throughout. Oh, so Arch Manning's looking into Texas. I'm like, how do you know about this? Like, and to the point where someone sent me a picture of Peyton Manning holding up a number 18 Longhorn jersey, and they tried to act like that was like inside information that they had received. I shared it with everyone on our Slack channel. And Jason Sukerman goes, I think that's an old photo. I did some more research, and that photo was taken with Tom Herman. But what was circulating was Peyton Manning's in town, and he's holding up a jersey, even though it was like years old. And so that kind of buzz where the average person is starting to want to know about Arch Manning, to the point, Catch, where I was getting messages, direct messages from people who were at the baseball game on Saturday telling me where Arch was sitting. Sarkisian, right now. Oh, now he's out in the outfield. He's sitting next to Sam Ellinger. Like, people were giving blow by blows of where this guy was. It was like a rock star, a rap star, country star, whatever. YouTube said, let me make a more general, up to date, a YouTube sensational person was in town. So my overreaction was that Manning mania really overtook the Longhorn fan base this weekend, and it was something to watch.
His being on campus in the way, kind of like you said, there was like a play-by-play of his entire day that really ended up transpiring on social media, that it went into the baseball game on Saturday night. It felt like a Kardashian Instagram thirst trap. Mm-hmm. I did. I felt like Chloe put, like a near naked photo on Instagram for the sole purpose of creating the kind of stir that just Arch standing on a sidewalk outside of a van. That there were photos, everything that had his name on it on on Saturday, basically went like a very small version of going viral. I mean, nothing went so big that there were tens of thousands and likes, but you could pretty much just type Arch Manning's name with a picture and you were going to get hundreds of retweets and likes, because it was really at a fever pitch. I think my big overreaction Monday comment is that this is the most I've seen Texas fans lose their minds over a sophomore, junior to be football prospect in the history of the program. I have been around long enough to see, because usually these visits take place in December and January. So it's a pretty common trick to take a guy to the basketball game, and then you've got a full auditorium that'll chant his name or give him some love. Like that, that's tried and true. People know about this. But this is different. This is in the middle of the summer. There aren't people on campus. This is a little bit of a different situation than anything that you would normally see. And again, him standing on a sidewalk was treated like the Beatles had come to the USA in 1964. I mean, and by the end of it on Saturday night, everybody in the arena or at Disch-Falk Field is looking at some point during that game. They set eyeballs on Arch Manning at least once because it organically was the talk of Austin. And you couldn't have been at that game and not known that Steve Sarkisian was there because he blew the cannon, right? Like this was a very flamboyant, planned, and executed. But there was also, again, something organic about it. The coaches couldn't be happier about the way it must have felt to Arch Manning, how important he was. You know, it wasn't talk. You could feel it. And I think Arch Manning suddenly puts himself into some rarefied air of potentially one of the most tracked and publicized prospects in the history of University of Texas football recruiting, because there's no question. You want to talk about thirst trap. Oh my God, these Texas fans want to win so bad. And they want a quarterback messiah so bad that a Manning came to town, and this place kind of lost its mind for a little bit.
Yeah, and here's the thing that you pointed out in your column that's on Orange Bloods. If you have not read it, you should make sure you check out Ketch's 10 Thoughts for the Weekend, because I thought it was one of his better columns of the year. Not to say I don't enjoy your columns, but there was sometimes I felt like I felt like every point I was like, man, this is really great. And one of the things
it was a banger. It was a banger.
It was good. It was really good. And one of the things you pointed out, though, Ketch, was that this was a live event. Right. And for many of these guys, and I'm talking about the baseball game, for many of these guys that we've been in the pandemic world for over a year, we're just coming out of it. You're talking about Zoom for the last year and change, and that's how they've been able to go and about talking to coaches. And, the previous week he went to Clemson. Right. And it was kind of like, to you, how you talked to one of your Clemson insiders, and it was kind of like just a normal visit. Right. A normal thing. But he came here, and it just so happens that Texas is, playing in a series to be able to go over to Omaha. The place is packed. So now all of a sudden you get to see what Texas is like. It's not a football game day situation, but you kind of get a chance and kind of get a buzz of the city and the atmosphere. And you're getting, it's hard not to get into it, right? It's hard not to get like, man, I like this. I'm feeling this type of thing. And you said something in your column that I read and I thought about, and I slightly disagreed with, and you know where I'm going with this. You said Clemson wants Arch Manning, Texas wants Arch Manning, Clemson needs Arch Manning, Texas needs, you kind of put it like in italics.
In both cases on the Texas side, the want and the need was in italics to emphasize that there was an extra layer of want and an extra layer of need versus the Clemson side.
I think it's all need. I think Texas needs Arch Manning. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, Clemson they'll figure it out, right? If Arch Manning doesn't come, they'll have a plan B that'll be really good, right? They didn't get their, they got like Cade Klubnik end up being like a plan B for Clemson, right? They had a guy that they wanted, but they end up getting a guy that's really freaking good in Cade Klubnik that you and I have talked about as one of the best quarterbacks here in the state of Texas. And that's who they said, okay, we'll take you. But they put him on ice. In this instance, Texas being able to get someone like Arch, yes, Clemson wants him and Clemson needs him, but Texas needs him because you haven't had a quarterback with that kind of pristine, that kind of hype you'd have to tell me what it was like when Colt McCoy was getting recruited and what that was like. But I would probably think it goes back to Vince. And we're talking about a long time. Now you're talking about almost 20 years since you had a quarterback with that kind of hype. And that's why I think Texas needs to be able to get a guy like that. Texas, when you played in the conference, I'll shut up, I'll let you speak. When you play in the conference with the Big 12 with Oklahoma, that every year they're bringing in 5-star quarterbacks, Catch. And it's just one 5-star after another. Texas needs to be able to have a bad mofo that they can lean on and say, this is our guy. Not the guy who you say is pretty good and maybe you can see if he can develop into something, but the guy that you say, damn it, bang it on the table, book it, this guy is bona fide. That's why I think Texas, from a branding standpoint, from everything, they need Arch Manning.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. You said Colt McCoy's recruitment.
Yeah.
And it made me think of Ryan Perler's recruitment. That has to be its own podcast.
Okay.
Because orangebloods.com is orangebloods.com today because of what happened in that year of recruiting.
Oh, okay.
Like, it is one of the most notorious moments in the history of the website. So
okay, well, listen, we do a lot of podcasts. I mean, we do a lot of shows, so we do them daily.
So just know, I want to talk about that and go down this weird rabbit hole, but just because you had a throwaway comment, but the light bulb went off and was like, oh man, people will go crazy for a Ryan Perler podcast or YouTube cast, whatever we are calling it, broadcast. But I don't want to go off the point that you're making, which I think is a really good one. And it's interesting. I'm talking to the Clemson insiders yesterday. They loved how this thing was shaping up from if this is going to be a Clemson, Texas recruiting showdown. And it very well could be, although LSU is going to, that kid might commit earlier than a lot of people expect to avoid the monsoon of LSU stuff that will happen if he stays uncommitted, because they are all in. So if we live in a world where that kid actually made a decision this summer, it would be because they can already sense the zoo. It will be inside the state of Louisiana, and they may just want to avoid that. But you can't dismiss Alabama at all. I mean, they're Alabama. I mean,
he will take that phone call. He will when it shows up and it shows Nick Saban. He's gonna take that phone call.
I mean, no Manning has ever played for a Saban. There are some storylines there. I mean, you can literally be Nick Saban's last quarterback. There's a way that I'm sure that recruiting pitch from Alabama will sound really good. But if this shapes up to be a Clemson versus Texas discussion, and really throw Alabama in there as well, it does come down to this want versus need conversation. And that can work a couple of different ways. It really can. And the Clemson people that I spoke with loved the idea that Clemson got to be kind of Joe Cool here. They can just be themselves and not do anything special and sell the idea, you come here to play for championships. It won't be a zoo, right? They described it as like, you come to Clemson because you don't want distractions, because you don't want a lot of fuss and attention, kind of the opposite of what Texas did this weekend, quite frankly. If you're Texas, you're pitching this, you're a rock star. He was this weekend. Like, that's got to be the first time in Arch Manning's entire life, Anwar, that he's felt like a rock star, because he's been like you said, he's been a big time recruit, but he hasn't gone on any trips. He's been in big stadiums as a guest before, where his family is the guest of honor.
Yeah. This
is the first time he's ever been kind of rolled out. And so, he felt that want and desire. And I think one of the real untalked about emerging storylines of his recruitment is he and his family are going to have to make a decision. Do you want to play for a school that, like Clemson or Alabama, that wants you, or do you want to go to a place like Texas where they need you? And I think the Manning family will understand the implications and the extra pressure that comes with the need component. And I think it's something that they will think about, because you can go to Clemson and you can almost, as quietly as a Manning could, you slide in, you're a part of something that's really huge as it is. And you can be a little bit under the radar and focus without the weight of the world on your shoulders. Whereas there have been 2 times that a Manning has visited Texas, and both times cameras and media have been waiting for them. This is a big city. This is not a small town. And I really think that there's one of the things that will make his decision for him will come down to whether or not he wants to be his legacy to potentially be the guy who made a football program, or if he'd rather just not quite have all the pressure that comes with that set of expectations. I think what's interesting is that Peyton went to Tennessee, weight of the world on his shoulders. Eli went to Ole Miss. They didn't rush him, but kind of the weight on his shoulders to be huge. Texas would be that kind of move. You go there, and the thought process is you change the program, a huge program, and make it big. I just don't know what they want the most, but I think that will be framed exactly like this by certainly the schools that recruit against Texas. They're going to start to make a deal out of the fact of, ooh, do you really want to be with somebody who's that thirsty for you? You know, we'll be cool. You know what I mean? Like, women and guys like different things. And some guys and women on both sides would really like someone who's really aggressive and really sweet and really letting you know they're your everything. We even talked about a particular relationship on Orange Bloods in our Slack channel this weekend about a couple. And we were like, homeboy may just love her too much. And eventually that can be a bit of a problem. Some people don't want quite that much love. It is the thing I think coming out of this Monday that I most want to know about Arch Manning and his family is how they perceive Texas's need for him versus a little bit less of a need for most of the other schools he'll be considering.
But it's interesting though, Ketch, when you think about that family, they've always been kind of in a need-based situation. When Archie gets to the Saints, they need him. Like he is the guy that basically helps and elevates that program, right? And so they absolutely need him. When Peyton gets to the Colts, they're horrible. They're a horrible franchise, and they needed him to elevate Indianapolis into being something good and to being where it was, right? It's the same way with Eli going to the Giants. They weren't good. And so they needed Eli. And without Eli, they don't necessarily get, obviously, the Super Bowls. So at the end of the day, you know, that's kind of how this family's built. Like, this family is built on having to kind of resurrect a little bit. Now, in the NFL, it's a little bit different, obviously, because you don't necessarily get to choose where you get drafted. Well, I guess Eli kind of sort of he chose where he was going to go. So maybe there is a little bit of a difference there. But to everything that you're saying, though, it will be interesting because Clemson will tell him, look, you've seen Trevor Lawrence. You've seen Deshaun Watson. Do you want to be the next? And Texas is basically going to tell Arch, do you want a statue? Because we've got some room out here for you if you want a statue. Would you like to have your own restaurant one day? I mean, we don't know how long Vince, Young Steakhouse is going to be around, but we can start using arches out here. And we're not talking golden arches. We're talking about, a Manning arch, so it will be interesting to know that And the other thing too, as the 2023 classes relates to Catch too, when you start thinking about the 2022, class, basically at this point is Malik Murphy, right? And they don't have anyone else, and so whoever else they bring in won't be as highly rated as Malik would be. So now, if you are Sark, you can tell them, look, man, I got Malik Murphy coming in. He's a project. Charles Wright is here. He's a backup. One of my quarterbacks is, if Casey Thompson wins the job, hopefully Hudson Card stays around. But if Hudson wins the job, Casey is gone. You can make a pitch to this guy that says, man, 2023, you can come in and compete to start right away. Like, there may be a clear path for you based off of what that quarterback room looks like by the time you get here. Because if Casey is the quarterback, that's basically 2 years. If Hudson's the quarterback, I mean, maybe that's 2 to 3, right? That he plays. But the pitch is there. And Sark can say, look, Clemson, they're going to bring in a bunch of guys. And I know you're not afraid of competition. No quarterback is. You can go and ball, and we'll feel confident with you. But here's a really good path for you to play major college football as a freshman. How do you feel about that?
I think it's going to be really curious that if you look at Clemson and Texas, right, and we forget about Alabama for just a second, it's interesting that both of those two schools, like, there's a Malik Murphy, Cade Klubnik conversation that if it came down to those two schools that Manning and his family would have to consider, right? And I wonder what the perception will look like at the end of this year with regards to, if all things are equal, who would you most like to avoid, right? Like, who would you want? Because it would have to be one of those two guys at this point. It's either Malik or it's Cade Klubnik. If you and I are team Cade Klubnik guys.
Yes.
I'd hate to give that guy a 1-year head start on me. I don't mean to be dismissive of Malik Murphy, but he is a guy that I think is thought of as a 2 or 3 year kind of developmental guy. I don't know of a single person that's like, Malik better get here and be ready as a true freshman. I mean, everybody kind of understands that he's a guy that needs high school reps right now. So I'm curious, because you and I have already had so many Malik Murphy, Cade Klubnik conversations. It is really interesting that all of these names that we've already been talking about will eventually be factors in this Arch Manning recruitment. And there are a lot of just weird little things to consider, like this one right here.
Quinn Ewers would be a part of that if you talked about Ohio State.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you're not getting Arch Manning if Quinn Ewers were to flip to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just not. I mean, there's a reason why Oklahoma and Ohio State are not on, I think, Arch Manning's visit list. When he's visiting all the big boys and a couple of them stick out why wouldn't you want to visit Lincoln Riley, right? It's like they got their dude. And look, I remember when Eli was being recruited by Texas back in 1998, Archie and Phil Simms got together and talked about, like, they talked, because both Chris Simms and Eli Manning were both looking at Texas. And in order to avoid that weird little NFL father-son dynamic from being even kind of pre-internet being a really big distraction, they knew what was going on. And Archie and Eli knew that Chris Simms was looking strongly at Texas, was looking to flip from Tennessee, and he went a different direction. Whereas had Chris Simms stayed at Tennessee, there's a very good chance that Eli Manning would have come to Texas. Now, it's one of those things you'll never know, a little bit like Nick Saban, what would have happened if they'd gotten rid of Matt Brown and offered him the job. There's just some of these things you'll never know. But to your point that I just wanted to reiterate something that you said. You're exactly right about when you talk about who is more naturally built potentially to go to a statue school. I think it probably is a Manning. right? Because I've been playing this thing in my head of like, I think the majority of guys would just like to tag along and go the easiest route possible. I think there is a bigger picture decision that gets made in these things that makes Texas attractive to the Manning family. Texas has to win this season, though.
Yes. Yeah. Preach.
I mean,
preach.
We can talk about all of the backup quarterbacks and all of this other stuff. Texas is getting ready to go ahead. This will probably be Texas versus Clemson versus maybe Alabama. And oh, by the way, in-state LSU. I mean,
yes.
You're not picking more difficult territory to do battle with a recruit over. And all of those schools have won championships in the last 5 years. So, like, and not conference championships. They've all won, like, less than 5 years. These are the reigning champions of this sport.
Yes.
And if you're Texas, you cannot go into that battle and go 8-4 or 9-3 and expect that when it's all said and done, the Mannings will absolutely gamble on a maybe, when we've seen proof from people like the Brockermeyers that, because the Brockermeyers could have had statues too.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't think they know that? But they were like, under Tom Herman right now, we can't do that. I mean, ultimately, that's what it came down to. Yeah. And it's just like with everything else, this staff has to be really good right away. And if they are, I think Texas can absolutely get Arch Manning. I've even kicked around the idea this weekend of a YOLO future cast for Arch Manning to Texas. Just call an early shot. You know, why the hell not? But it's all going to be predicated on whether or not this team, and you know what that means? You better come out and beat Louisiana and Arkansas.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the Sports Illustrateds of the world writing that those two games could be early hurdles. And look, Mac Brown started 1-2 in his career. And we've seen basically every coach that Texas has had has started 1-2 in his first year. I don't think Steve Sarkisian has that luxury. I think the rules are going to be tighter on him. The competition is just too extreme. It's too good. They cannot be pretty good this year. They have to be better than that.
I think in order to get the Mannings, on board, you've got to be in the Big 12 championship game. I mean, because essentially you're saying that you only lost 2 games at that point, and you finished the season 10-2. You're in the Big 12 championship game, go to a decent bowl, New Year's Six bowl. All of a sudden, that's something that you can rock with. But when we're talking about from a national perspective, especially from a quarterback position, it's harder to get guys to come out of state when they've got that kind of cachet, just for a hope and a dream. Now, I can see what you'll say. Well, when Bijan did that, Bijan wanted to play for Stan Drayton. Stan Drayton has got the Ezekiel Elliott card right now, and every running back loves them some Ezekiel Elliott. And so when he's able to say Ezekiel Elliott, Carlos Hyde, he's able to kind of go down the list of guys that he's coached with NFL, Ohio State. People, that's modern day. People rock. Okay, yeah, I want to go with Stan, and I want to be able to do that. Absolutely. When we talk about from the quarterback position, then you're going to be, if you don't have that success, now you're stuck with in-state guys that you have to hope were really, really high on Texas. Like they always wanted to be a Longhorn. You have to hope for the Sam Ehlinger of the world in order to get that kind of person. So to your point, there can't be they can't be stumbling out the gate. They can't be lost to Louisiana, lost to Arkansas. That's your death blow. Like you could kiss that goodbye. That ship has sailed, because all these other teams that you're talking about, you're going to be competing against. We know those are Final Four teams. Like that.
Well, Anwar, I think to your point, Texas fans don't think about this enough. when they get into a battle of, let's look, everybody now knows Texas is a factor. So if you're Clemson, you got to have a counter to Texas. If you're A&M and LSU, you've got to chip away at the Texas thing, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, these other schools won't try to slam the other schools with a "they're not really good enough" card. But Alabama, Clemson, and LSU will be like, "Are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
Texas. And it's one thing when one school does that, right? Like A&M, if A&M and Texas are kind of hating on each other, whatever, right? But if you're recruiting against 4 schools, and when it comes to one school, they're all using the same hammer. And the hammer is, they're not really big time. It has an impact. It's the great factor in Texas football recruiting that I don't think people have had enough appreciation for how damaging it is. And I guarantee you it impacted the Brockermeyers, because you can't look at, if it's Alabama, you're trying to get in the top 2 for the Brockermeyers. It's hard to punch at Alabama, other than they got too many good players.
Yeah. But at that point, you're telling a kid he's not good enough. So you can't even use that.
Yes. But if you're 10 schools trying to get into that one Texas spot, it's an easy hammer to use. And it's really effective. It's the thing that has kids saying things like, I want to see how they do on the field this year. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that Texas, I think, has to watch out for. If I was Sark, I would pull him aside and say, what is, not for everybody, for Arch Manning, what is your counterpunch to all of these schools whispering in his ear, oh man, pick any place, but don't go to Texas for this reason, they're not good enough. Like, he's got to have an answer to that, because I think it is one of the mortal death blows that when Texas gets on the outside looking in for their for in-state guys, like, they're having problems there. And until you win, it's a tough thing to counter, because these other schools are saying, dude, we're in the playoffs every year. These guys have been talking about hiring our coach and all this other, like, they want to be us. Come to the real thing. And I think that Texas has to be prepared for. But ultimately, you got to win a lot of games. You got to win 10.
Yeah.
You got to win 10. And I can see a world where Arch Manning comes to Texas where they go 9-3 and he's okay with that. But boy, a lot of hoops. A lot of my idea of how that happens is very storybook. And, Mac Brown was able to pull that off in 1998 because he had a Heisman winner. Like, you need to be able to have a nuclear weapon. And the good news is I think this Alabama staff having a lot of rings on their fingers allows for them to get some benefit of the doubt. It just only gets extended as far as your team not being viewed as not good enough.
It's interesting, Ketch. We were talking about it over the weekend, and we talked about things that people use against Texas as far as recruiting is concerned. And, Michael Huff put out, a picture of some of the old timers, and I'm going to call them old timers. They don't want to be called that, but you're in your 40s. You're starting to get older, and the old football players, and it's all gas, no brakes. And it's with, Sarkisian and everything, but it's kind of like we talked on the podcast, the last time. And I'm so used to saying podcasts and videos. And by the way, someone asked me, man, I love these videos. I love, like, you guys just started doing it. And I was like, we've been actually doing videos back from the Facebook days for years. We only transitioned it to YouTube, but we've been actually, Ketch and I did a post-game show and other topics on Facebook for years and years and years. But anyway, long story short,
we're the first, we made a point when you first came to Orange Bloods 7 years ago, to do a lot of videos. for those who are watching us for the first time, you get to see Anwar and I very casual. But Anwar's first year at Orange Bloods was like he was known for wearing dress to the nines.
Oh yeah.
20-degree weather.
It's hot as hell. I
And he
still
just
do.
didn't know it. Anwar came from a world where you always wear a coat and tie. That's just what you did. And I tried to like when I interviewed him, I said, Anwar, one of the cool things about Austin is like you can wear shorts and a polo, and people were like, "Oh, he dressed up."
And so I was like, so then so I go to games and everyone's like kind of chilled out and they're just, wearing a little polo and stuff. And I'm here in my suit and I'm like, what?
I'm they're like calling me out on it. Like, man, Anwar, where are you going?
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to work. Where are you going? And so, I remember like the LSU game, I was sweating. People like, if people always ask me funny stuff, they, like the most obvious, man, are you hot in that suit? No, I'm cold in the damn suit. Of course I'm hot in this suit. Don't you see me sweating through the back of this damn thing? But yeah, but I still, I say, well, you're going to keep Austin weird, that I'm going to be weird because I'm going to dress up. You guys can dress however you want to dress. At home, with kids running around, clearly, it's a little bit, and I got to get out the door in a few minutes. So that's that. So anyway, when he shows his picture, Catch, and, it's all gas, no brakes. And yes, all the old heads love the picture. It's Huff, it's Vince, it's Earl, and, a bunch of other, the old heads on some of the, the legends of the, the Longhorns. And then but I say, and I'm going to keep saying it, these kids were 1 year old when these guys played. They don't know. They don't really know about that. They were babies. My kid who ran into the shot, that's like saying Texas wins a national championship now. And then, 15 years from now, someone's trying to recruit him. They're like, hey, man, don't you remember Casey Thompson? And he's like, man, I don't know. I was on Paw Patrol, dude. I don't even I got some Paw Patrol for you, but I don't know nothing about what you're talking about. So that's what I did.
In a normal recruitment, Texas, I think, wouldn't be able to defeat that. What Texas has going for them is what they did this weekend. They made Arch Manning feel what being needed what it really means. And I don't know that another school, I know we got to wrap up. My final comment will just be this, and I'll let you wrap it up for us.
Okay.
Texas's advantage here is twofold. It's this. There's a story that they get to sell where we need you. They don't tell every kid in the 2023 recruiting class, you could have a statue, and I guess you could, but to a Manning, it makes sense, right? These are guys who get statues built of themselves. They go to Hall of Fames. They get drafted in the first round as the number 1 overall pick. Like, that's who they are. And I think that there's a story that Texas can sell that's a little different than everybody else. And it does need to be said that the one advantage that Texas may have over these other schools is Sark is going to be his guru. And when you look at Clemson, they're actually in the middle of some assistant coach turnover. There's a good chance that both of the coordinators that they've had during the Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence days will be gone, and they'll have to fill that void. You won't be able to just say, come be with the guys that built Deshaun and Trevor. And Alabama's got some of the same thing going on, whereas Sark left and now Bill O'Brien is there. And look, Bill O'Brien is a perfectly good coach, right? I mean, he's very impressive, but he ain't going to be at Alabama for 3 or 4 years. That's not why he's there. The one maybe on-field advantage that Texas has right now is that his his quarterback development is under the one guy that can guarantee to be there the entire time that he's there. Clemson doesn't have an offensive head coach. Neither does Alabama.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for being needed, right? And there's something to be said. You think back to your dating world, Catch. You've seen really just a dime, like a 10, right? I mean, really attractive woman, and you see her with a dude, And you're just like, how did he get that? And you understand that it's money, but she can date a lot of dudes who have at least amount of money. But sometimes she knows that dude needs her. Like, that's an upgrade for that guy. He understands he's got the prize, right? He understands that he has a prize, and he treats her accordingly. He treats her like the queen that she is. Now, some of the other dudes who feel like feeling themselves and feel like they look good, they may treat her just like a normal person. And she may be okay with that, but she may not like that. But this dude has her on the boat, has her on the vacations, right? Taking her to Dubai, taking her around the world. This dude is treating her amazingly. And I'm not saying it's all about the materialistic, but sometimes it's good to be with someone who
has to give up something in the looks department.
Yeah, she's giving up a little something. And so so I use that as the analogy to say, hey, you know what? Sometimes it's good to you feel like you're needed in a situation. You and I have worked in this industry for a long time, Ketch, and we've had people contact us to do different projects. And we know what it's like when people just kind of want you on something and just to be a part of it. And when people really need you to be a part of it, when
Absolutely.
people, and you know, when you interview people, like there's a totally different thing of, you know, someone who wants to be here to someone who's like, man, I need to be on Orange Blood. So
I think I won you over by selling the idea that I needed you, and
correct.
I sold a story for you. And I think, again, sometimes that can work against you, but sometimes it can really work for you.
For some people, for me, it worked for me because I was like, wow, this guy really wants me there. And I've been in places that I've talked to, I don't, you know, but different people, and they're like, you can come and work for us. And I'm like, I don't feel that.
Join the team.
Yeah, you know, be a part of it. And I'm like, I don't know. You know, you know, it's like, it's the Jerry Maguire thing, right? Show me the money. Like, he wanted to feel it. Like, and so maybe that's what it ends up being for Arch. The good part is, the last thing I'll say is the good part is they've got him on campus. The key will be to see if they can get him back during football season for a game. Like, if you start hearing something like that, then you know there's progress being made. But this is 3 of a potential 453 Arch Manning videos that we'll probably make between now and next year. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for subscribing.
Tomorrow for our next
for when we speculate on what Arch Manning probably would eat for breakfast if he came to Texas. We're going to go through all the best food trucks here in Austin, and we're going to simulate what Arch Manning may or may not like. Tune in for that on Tuesday. I'm done.
I figured that was our sign off.
No, all right, then if that's our sign, no, you can sign us off properly.
Next time. We'll talk to you later.
See ya.